So here's the thing about the final episode of House of the Dragon Season 2. It's not doing so hot right now. Specifically, it has a 6.5 on IMDb, which for a television episode is pretty bad. Usually means it's bad. So when Fazli and I sat down to react to the finale, we had no idea what we were getting into, and then we ended up really enjoying it. Even if there was no big blowout battle, this episode resolved a lot of the long-standing character arcs that were set up at the beginning of this season, or even near the beginning of last season, making for a lot of shocking and rewarding moments, even if no one expressly died. By the end of the episode, I wasn't disappointed. I was hyped. Not only that, but we found that the hour and a half flew by insanely quickly, with us having a lot of investment in the scenes that were mostly dialogue and not action, due to the intense amount of buildup that a lot of these character-driven storylines were given throughout the season. So, since this episode isn't doing well in the public eye, you are totally entitled to your own opinion, by the way, I thought I would state some of the reasons that I actually enjoyed this season finale, and felt that this season, while slower, did have a really strong payoff in the end, exciting me greatly for what's to come with these characters, especially since I gave it a 10 on IMDb. It's just my opinion. I give 10s to episodes I really like. Please don't yell at me. If you guys are allowed to hate it, I'm allowed to like it. One reason is that I understand that finales aren't always explosive. First of all, I'd like to point out that while many people did expect this episode to be an all-out battle, finales are under no obligation to deliver any sort of stunning climax or cliffhanger. A finale's job is to provide resolution to the arcs and storylines presented across the season. Sometimes the climax is also present within that episode, but not always. Think about Game of Thrones, where most of the more momentous events took place in the episode prior to the finale. Ned's execution, Battle of Blackwater, Red Wedding, etc. And the finale instead took care of resolving the loose threads that were built up over the course of the season and preparing the characters for their journeys next season, which is largely what this episode aims to do. Unfortunately, many reviews saw that as stalling or simply setting up a preview for where the show will go next and not actually accomplishing anything in terms of plot, which is not really true. I mean, Daemon's allegiance is sworn, Alicent commits treason, Aegon escapes King's Landing, Helaena reveals Aemon's fate, Tyland secures help in breaking the barrier, Rhaenyra finds the sheep slaughterer, Jace clashes with the new riders. The problem with this episode is not a lack of forward plot momentum. It definitely has that. The problem is that the plot did not involve any sort of violent, exciting clash, instead focusing on tense conversations and crucial character moments, which I found incredibly rewarding. This isn't the only show to employ this strategy either. It's not unheard of. BoJack Horseman, my favorite show, as many of you know, as well as the animated Castlevania on Netflix, also employ this strategy, and I think that it works really well. Another reason why I love this episode is because of Rhaenyra and Alicent. It's pretty much a reason why I love every episode, but perhaps the best moment of the entire finale comes from the conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent near the end of the episode. There's been a lot of focus individually on Rhaenyra and Alicent over the course of this season, and their struggle with the paths their fathers have laid out for them. And I think there has been an equal amount of frustration with these two characters, Rhaenyra with inability to move forward and take action in the war, and Alicent with her impotence in the council and frustration with her children. Like I said, they have spent a great deal of time this season on these individual conflicts. Slowly but surely, Rhaenyra has been taken down from the rash, naive girl that she was when she became her father's heir, realizing that war is not all it's cracked up to be. She sends her confidants out to die while she is stuck in Dragonstone, paralyzed by the inability to act and the want to rid the realm of suffering. Meanwhile, Alicent, after losing her husband and position, finds that following the rules to the letter and being the perfect lady that she was raised to be isn't necessarily the path she wants for herself. She has an affair, loses all control of her children, minus Helaena, because she's the queen. Not literally, but also literally. And eventually only has the desire to break free, which leads to their meeting in this episode. When Alicent showed up in Dragonstone, my jaw dropped. For me, this was the shocking moment of the episode, and it was so cleverly set up too. Having the earlier meeting in episode 3 this season end so poorly, with both believing there is nothing to be done than fight, and then having the subsequent episodes rely heavily on the two exploring what they actually want from their lives, is genius, because it makes the meeting feel so earned, especially after so many episodes. In episode 3, Having the conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent end in agreement would be too quick and far out of character for Alicent. Instead, what that episode does do is plant a little seed of doubt in Alicent's brain, which the next episodes water and help grow. She sets Aegon in his place, directly insulting him, is horrified upon learning what Aemond might have done to Aegon, she's cut down in the council room, as she watches the small folk suffer at her son's hand, and finally, her son becomes directly aggressive with her daughter, who only wishes to remain peaceful. I firmly believe that all the time we spent with Alicent, especially that outside of King's Landing in the woods, is completely necessary for this moment. Alicent has always been dutiful and subservient to what her father and the men around her want. In general, what her family wants. She protected her children and demanded retribution for Aemond's eye. She worked to get her own children on the throne, to secure their future. She's always done whatever is necessary for the duty to her family. For this woman to agree for her friend to kill her son explicitly, there would need to be a lot working against those strong family values. And there is. And I don't regret a single second we spent with Alicent leading up to this point, even if a lot of it felt like inaction. It really validated a ton of her storyline in this finale, even though I'd found very few parts of this storyline boring anyway. And for Rhaenyra, who went into episode 3 naively hoping to end it all with a conversation, she now knows that one conversation isn't enough to end all this, as much as she wants it to. She's been beaten down this season, and really shown the realism of what running a war is like, especially from the council. And all that forced inaction and loss is the cause of her wisening up to this. She knows that she cannot be a conqueror and leave the current king alone and untouched. She knows the harsh truth that she must take his head, and it is only because of her journey throughout the season, making hard sacrifices for any reward, killing innocents to find new dragon riders, sending others to fight for her so that she may remain safe. All of this development might not be as interesting as poisoning, sword fights, and dragon clashes, but I will argue that it is just as important for the overall plot of the show. Not to mention, in terms of pacing, for the season to begin with the son for a son demand, and to end with that demand being answered directly by Alicent, is extremely smart, and places a very neat bookend on either side of this season. It really does, to me at least, feel like a book's worth of information, even though, yes, I know it's not, and ending here does feel right from a storytelling perspective, as the setup to the season dealt with a lot of the themes that were resolved at the end. Another thing I loved about this episode was Daemon's allegiance. I was honestly frustrated with Daemon's storyline this season. Yes, I do feel that it may have gone on for too long, and yes, I do feel that there was likely a pacing problem which led to that frustration, but I do think the finale recontextualized it in a really positive way for me. See, the whole time, I thought this was building up to Daemon's betrayal of Rhaenyra, which is something I already saw as in character for him, which might explain why I felt like we were wasting time. However, this whole time, the flashbacks went out of their way to show the ugliness of the throne, what he'd have to do to reach it, what it was like on his brother's health, and it led Daemon to understand his true purpose, which is serving Rhaenyra? Huh? I did not see that happening, and once again, it was very anti my perception of Daemon. So it is good that I got all this context through the Weirwood delusions, cutting off Rhaenyra's head, confronting his miserable brother, showing his greed is like Aemon's. And now I look back and I feel that time was actually excellently used. And while, yes, maybe it was stretched a little bit too long, if I did feel bored at one point, it hasn't really done its job, but I am much more eager now to rewatch those scenes and pick up on hints that I missed, now that I know where they were taking it, and that I was misreading. Another reason that I loved this episode was Corlys's family struggle. One reason that I feel Season 2 might feel a bit off to a lot of fans was the addition of a large amount of new characters. The cast expanded quite a bit from the first season, and as such, more time was needed to be spent elsewhere, namely with Alan and Adam, whose roles in the overarching story were not really clear at first. I understand why that might make the story feel a bit slower, especially since Alan specifically has a very tempered reaction, never really showing his cards. But in this finale, he completely blows up at Corlys. I love how they use Rhaenys' death to dive into how Corlys is taking it into consideration and trying to focus more on his family. But what I loved most about this was Alan's rebuffing of those actions. His desire to live his own life apart from his father and succeed on his own is completely understandable given how long he was outright ignored by him. And That explosion of emotion, whoo, wow, what incredible acting that was from Abubakar Salim. It felt so natural, and like Alan had been holding it back all season. The rage that he was able to display at this man who was, quote, trying to help him was incredible. It really made all this time spent with Corlys and his two bastards feel more worth it. Even if, yes, I understand, watching the brothers talk to each other on their own might not be the most fascinating thing for you, especially if you don't understand what their importance is yet. Another reason is Aemond's fall from grace, parentheses plus Helaena. Aemond has been on the up and up pretty much all season. He was able to take advantage of his brother and very easily place himself on the Iron Throne, as well as take out the largest dragon in Rhaenyra's fleet. I mean, he wasn't even planning to take over the Iron Throne that day, but he kinda just was like, oh, here's my opportunity, and burnt his brother. This season has been about Aemond's rise, but in the past few episodes, and especially the finale, the weaknesses of Aemond's reign become more and more apparent, ignoring the small folk, throwing tantrums, and always needing to prove how tough he is. But the last episode is really the final nail that proves Aemond's shortcomings as a ruler, and ultimately as a villain in the coming seasons. He's clever, but he's also rather petty. He wants revenge for his treatment as a child, and as such, he lashes out in rage at those who don't really deserve it. He destroys an entire city in this finale, mostly out of anger for losing the upper hand. And this shows the audience, and other characters, that he really is still a child who feels everything was taken away from him. And then Helaena also reads him for absolute filth. She reveals his eventual fate, and shows the audience what his role will really be. I expected more from Aemond, but this season, thanks to its time taken with Aemond's rise and fall, has proven to me that his arc moving forward will perhaps move to even darker and more desperate places, which is very important as a transition from the cunning, ambitious, and clean Prince Regent we have been working with thus far. To see him so consumed by rage and not plotting and calculating is very different, and I think we are going to see a very new side of Aemond in the next season. And this season was important to set that up, getting everything he wanted, and then having it start to fall apart. One more reason I love this episode was the internal dragon struggle. I never really thought about how finding small folk to ride the dragons would affect how Jace feels about his own position, and the precariousness of this position is really dangled in front of us in this finale. For some reason, mainly Ulf, the scenes with the new dragon riders are extremely tense, where they should be excited allies. And while not overtly exciting material to watch, these small acts of disrespect from Ulf and Hugh trying to keep him in line, or even Ulf quarreling slightly with Adam, it's all a rough sign of things to come. An important setup for what I assume is going to happen in Season 3. I haven't read the book. This episode does a lot of work placing Rhaenyra in a more favorable position. Like I said, knocking Aemond down a peg, so that the war seems more balanced. However, it doesn't make the mistake of placing Rhaenyra too high in an advantage. It shows that there are still cracks in the order, and they only become more gaping as the episode goes on. It makes me not only uneasy, but also eager for the next season, which is an important job for the finale to do. As well, the time spent with Hugh, Ulf, and Adam this season is useful in understanding why they purport themselves the way they do in front of the Queen. We get a lot of context for the different upbringings of these men, and this finale does a wonderful job of showing how these personalities will clash in the future, especially now that they are driving giant murder machines, using what they built up over Season 2 so far. And the final reason that I loved this episode was the world building. As I've said before, this season expanded the scope of the cast, but also the war itself. Traveling to Essos with Tyrant might be frustrating to deal with in the finale, but is hugely necessary for the upcoming battle. Contextualizing Corlys' battle with the Triarchy from long ago, and having it return with new, intimidating characters that threaten the crucial blockade is very exciting, even if we are not actively fighting for the blockade at this time, at least from my point of view. Not only this, but there's no telling the importance of some of these characters in the future. Who knows what this story holds for Tyland? Like I said, I haven't read the books. He suddenly seems much more a player in the story than I anticipated. I always thought he was a joke, especially when Aegon's son was just playing with his toy at the council meeting. So it is important that we spend this time with him and the other new characters, especially as context for the upcoming battles. The sequence at the end that shows all the different players riding into this next set of battles proves this. We end this season with a vast more amount of people to care about than the last one, and that makes the possibilities for next season's scale even wider, now that there are so many variables to consider in this battle. It's only gotten less simple, and this season and finale were necessary to get us to this point. Overall, this season was about making war a possibility. The Blacks are running for the majority of this season, playing catch-up to the Greens, who are basically able to flank them with Vhagar and a superior ground army at every turn. It takes a lot for these characters to return to each other after the tumultuous end of the last season, and there needed to be a ton of character work to make the choices in the finale make any sort of sense. And those choices, I do feel, are extremely momentous and much more important than everybody considers them to be. I really enjoyed and was genuinely shocked and pleased by this finale, even though there was no battle. Yes, I do agree that Season 1 was probably paced better. It is clear that Season 2 is more setting up for Season 3. But do I think that makes this finale weak in any way? Not even remotely. It was thoroughly entertaining, exciting, and most importantly, it led me to feel content with what we'd gotten. I felt the most important threads in my mind were resolved. Larys has revealed his position with Aegon. Rhaenyra and Alicent have an understanding. Aemond has fallen from grace. Helaena has established her place in the war, and Rhaena has finally found her dragon. Yes, there was setup to get us excited for Season 3, but there was also a plethora of resolution to the main themes and character arcs we've been building upon since Episode 1 of this season. And for some characters, Episode 1 of the show. And, like I said, overall, the cast is just generally bigger. We were focusing on Rhaena, Baela, Jace, Adam, Alis, Corlys, and all of our side characters way more than we did in the first season, including those on the council. But I am curious to hear what you guys thought about this finale. While I really liked it, I would like to hear what you think. And if you want to support us further, go to patreon.com/PosiTVty. You can join for free, and there you get free previews of the videos before they actually hit YouTube, up to like 5 minutes. But it's a really cool way to get early content for yourself. And then if you want to contribute to our Patreon, you get those full videos very early. You get to vote on what we see on the channel, and you get full uncut reactions. So you can just watch the episode right with us, which is so cool. And we really appreciate your support on there. But we also appreciate everything you guys do for us on YouTube as well. But anyway, let us know what you would like to see next as well in the comments below. Would you like more House of the Dragon videos? I haven't really done any thus far, so I hope you enjoyed. But we will see you guys for the next one, and goodbye.